Number 10. Arkham Asylum. One of the great things about Batman compared to any other hero is the way his comics can lean really heavily on the darker aspects of human beings, and because of that, they can also get away with much more expressionistic art that can be really gorgeous while also being extremely terrifying. As an example, let's talk about the graphic novel Arkham Asylum. The gritty gothic artwork, which looks like it came straight out of my nightmares, meshes with the extremely dark, disturbing, supernatural themes of the story to take what is essentially just Batman going to work to secure Arkham Asylum into a brutal, mind-twisting funhouse ride. Batman takes on some of his most well-known foes here, but the fights aren't the compelling part, it's the sheer freakiness of it all. The real brutality of the story comes in its horror and the dark past of Arkham Asylum itself, which is slowly drip-fed to us as we make our way through pages and pages of the most terrifying Joker I have ever seen. It's messed up. Number 9. Face Off. Speaking of Joker, in Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman Endgame storyline, the Joker eventually kidnaps the whole Batman family and has an incredibly messed up dinner party. The Joker has Batman in a chair that, thanks to pressure plates, will trigger the passing of the whole Bat crew if he decides to get up. With each Bat family member wearing a bag over their head, Joker reveals their dinner, and it appears as though he has seemingly separated the skin from their faces and served it to them at the dinner table on ice, with all the Bat family members revealed to have bandages on their faces instead. It's honestly terrifying and super gruesome, but it is all just a ruse to try and break the Batman yet again. Instead, he proceeds to try and burn them all alive and then infects them all with Joker toxin, causing them to fight each other, distracting Batman from his fight with the Clown Prince of Crime. Number 8. Bane. There are many deranged and off-the-wall villains in Batman's rogues gallery, and while the Dark Knight has suffered losses and defeats at the hands of a few, none of those defeats are as infamous as the one he suffered at the hands of Bane. By issue 11 of the Broken Bat storyline, Bane had managed to find out that Bruce Wayne was indeed Batman. Bane surprised Bruce at his home, pumped himself with venom, and laid a brutal beating on the Dark Knight in his own home. The fight continued on into the Batcave, and completely taken by surprise, Batman is on his last legs when the venom-fueled tank of a man lifted Batman over his head and dropped him spine first onto his massive back-breaking knee. The brutal move, captured in one of the most iconic panels ever, put the Batman completely out of commission, requiring him to choose another to fill his role as the protector of Gotham until he could make his triumphant return. Number 7. Barbara Gordon. Alan Moore and Brian Bolland's infamous 1988 Batman and Joker centered story, The Killing Joke, had Joker do something most people just didn't expect: the crippling and violation of Batgirl, otherwise known as Barbara Gordon. The events of the story would eventually spur the newly wheelchair-bound Gordon into becoming the fan favorite Oracle. It was incredibly divisive and controversial. While it won an Eisner Award at the time and was critically lauded as one of the best Batman stories ever told, it has definitely changed the tone of Batman comics, with Frank Miller's 1986 The Dark Knight Returns sending the tone even further down to the dark rabbit hole. Writer Alan Moore has reflected on the story by saying, quote, "It is far too violent," and he called the book, quote, "a regrettable misstep on my part." For Batman, any harm done to any member of the Bat family is ultimately on his shoulders, and while she does not pass away, Barbara was crippled and forever altered by the event, something that haunts Batman forever. Number 6. Zur-En-Arrh. The Batman of Zur-En-Arrh was introduced in 1958's Batman number 113 as Tulano, who protects a faraway planet in a red, yellow, and purple Batman-inspired suit. While a dazed Batman pilots the Batplane over Gotham City one night, he finds himself transported to the world of Zur-En-Arrh by Tulano, and Bruce helps Tulano fight off alien invaders with Superman-like powers and then is transported back to Earth. Now, fast forward to Grant Morrison's run on Batman, and the whole adventure was revealed to be a hallucination caused by an isolation experiment on Bruce by the villain Dr. Simon Hurt, with Zur-En-Arrh being derived from Bruce Wayne mistaking his father's last words, which were, quote, "Zorro and Arkham," which is the show they had just watched before his parents were brutally snatched away from him. Using the trigger phrase, Dr. Hurt broke Bruce's mind and left him on the streets of Gotham. However, Bruce had developed a backup personality to bring the fight back to Dr. Hurt, the much more brutal Batman of Zur-En-Arrh. Number 5. Hush. Batman Batman Hush in its entirety could be seen as a brutal moment. It strikes at the childhood life of Bruce Wayne himself, pushing Batman to a point we rarely ever see him go. In Batman issue number 614, right smack dab in the middle of the Hush story arc, Tommy Elliot, the childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, loses his life at what seems to be the hands of the Joker. All the years and years of distress caused by the Joker, the people hurt, the lives lost, they all fuel this insane rage inside of Bruce Wayne, who begins to lay a spectacular beatdown on the Joker, knocking out both Harley Quinn and even Catwoman, who both had tried to stop him. Batman almost goes to the point of permanently bringing an end to the Joker, beginning to put aside his morals to finally be rid of this homicidal plague on Gotham City. It's not until Jim Gordon intervenes while Batman has his gloves around the Joker's neck that the Dark Knight finally relents. The worst part is that if Batman did go through with this, the Joker wasn't even the one responsible for the crime in the first place. Number 4. Great White. Warren White, not Walter White, is a Batman villain who isn't exactly the most well known, as he is just really underused. However, his backstory with Arkham Asylum Living Hell is one of the most interesting villain origins of the entire roster of rogues at DC's disposal. Despite that, the Great White Shark's origins are so dark that it's really doubtful they will ever be adapted to the big screen, and that's because, well, it really ain't fun for the whole family. Just like everything else on this list, pretty much. Warren is sent to Arkham Asylum after pretending to be mentally disturbed to avoid a longer jail sentence, meaning he pled insanity. But he really did not know what he had just got himself into. Arkham is not the place you want to go to, even if the alternative is jail. The asylum and those who are, quote, treated there, put Warren through the ringer in every single way possible. This was bad enough, but it culminates in the criminal known as Jane Doe stealing his identity and leaving him in a freezer to perish. While Warren doesn't actually succumb to being frozen, he does have a number of his extremities, including his nose, frozen to the point that they fall off. This leaves White both physically and mentally traumatized, and understandably so. That's why the Great White Shark is how he is. Number 3. Damian's demise. The revelation that Batman was a father was something Batman was not quite ready for, but his attachment to and love for his son, Damian Wayne, was strong and has only grown over time. Missing out on key moments, the young Wayne had a lot to learn and had a mindset that Batman felt it necessary to correct through love, consistency, and hard work. Damian was becoming a fantastic Robin, even if he was a little smug and quite violent at times. He grew on many fans and on Batman himself, but just as Damian's mother had brought him into the world through deceit and villainy, she also played a key role in taking him out of it. Talia al Ghul and her forces invaded Gotham, and when Damian was taken out by his mad clone, the Heretic, Batman experienced a loss that affected him so strongly. He experienced a thirst for vengeance against all he thought responsible for Damian's demise. Eventually, that vengeance found its way to Apocalypse, where Batman faced down Darkseid to retrieve his son's body, but ended up reviving him instead, so it's all thumbs up. Number 2. Flashpoint Batman. When the Flashpoint universe was created, it changed a lot of characters. Possibly one of the most interesting ones was Batman, who in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, with Bruce losing his life instead way back in Crime Alley, and Martha Wayne? She became the Joker. It's twisted and cool, and this Batman has a different moral code. Taking out criminals is not a problem. But when he finds out that mainline Bruce Wayne becomes the Batman, he deems this unacceptable and he tries to change his son's ways. Instead of being a nice father alongside Bane, he ruined Batman and Catwoman's wedding, causing her to leave him at the altar, nearly had Batman send Mr. Freeze to the afterlife for a crime he did not commit, kidnapped Damian Wayne, hired the KG Beast to take out Dick Grayson, he had Bane put Alfred Pennyworth in the ground, and then Thomas incapacitated Bruce with fear toxin and kidnapped him. He dug up the coffin of Martha Wayne, wishing to use the Lazarus pits to resurrect Martha so that they could all just be a happy family again. But this whole thing is super messed up and it did not go the way he planned. Number 1. The death of Alfred. Like I said, instead of, I don't know, being a good father, Flashpoint Batman teams up with Bane to break Bruce. In 2019's Batman number 77, Alfred Pennyworth is taken taken out by Bane and Thomas Wayne, the Flashpoint Batman, in front of Damian Wayne's eyes. Bane and Thomas take Alfred hostage and warn the Batman family that if Batman comes into Gotham, Alfred is kaput. Instead, Alfred essentially sacrifices himself because he knows that Batman will not let Alfred get hurt. Alfred pleads with Bane, quote, not in front of the boy. But with a twist of his arms, Bane snaps the neck of Bruce's father figure and oldest friend. Bruce discovers the body of Alfred in Batman number 83, confirming that Alfred is in fact gone, and Bruce is beside himself with pain. As tears come to his face, he can barely even speak. Alfred's passing is complicated since he does come back as a villain later on. Now, Alfred's death is complicated since he does come back as a villain. Alfred is revived by a maniac named Brandon Crawford and brought back as, quote, Outsider. Outsider's radiation-exposed powers include telekinesis and having a nearly impenetrable stone body. He has none of Alfred's memories or personality, and his singular goal is to destroy Batman and Robin. The realization of who this villain is just adds insult to injury for Bruce Wayne, and it's very, very bad.
Number 10. Sins Past. One of the darkest Spider-Man moments to date that continues to haunt my personal nightmares is the revelation that came from Sins Past. This story starts in Amazing Spider-Man issue 509. During one of the worst flashbacks in comic book history, we learned that Gwen Stacy had an affair with Norman freaking Osborn, which resulted in a pregnancy. Gwen gave birth to twins, and their existence was forever kept secret from Peter Parker. Osborn raised the two children to hate Spider-Man, making them believe that Spider-Man was their father and that he killed their mother, when in reality, Osborn was their father, and although I guess kinda debatable, I think we could still argue that Green Goblin is much more to blame for Gwen's death than Peter is. This whole story was an extra level of dark and twisted that makes it both unforgettable and at the same time something you wish you could forget. But alas. Fortunately, it was retconned during Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man, but it still represents a super big low for me and a terrifying point in Spider-Man's history. When we thought this was true. Also, Peter's reaction. No. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like button. Seriously, feed the algorithm. Praise be the algorithm. Number 9. Loss of Iron Man. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, something that hit Peter really hard was the death of Tony Stark. Initially, it had been Spider-Man himself who had perished during the snap when Thanos kills basically half the universe using the Infinity Gauntlet. Peter was part of the 50% who lost their lives and seemingly got straight up dusted. He would return when Hulk used the Infinity Stones to bring everyone back 5 years later, but Iron Man would be forced to use them one more time to eliminate the past version of Thanos and his army. As Tony Stark is ultimately just a really smart human man, using the Infinity Stones to do something so great and so extreme not only took all of his energy, draining him, but ultimately cost him his life as well, completely depleting Tony. So he's completely out of the story now, at least for now. It's comics, so still anyone could come back at any time. This gave us a heartbreaking scene between Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, where the two heroes once more were forced to say goodbye to one another near the end of Avengers Endgame. But with their roles reversed from Avengers Infinity War. You see what they did there? With Spider-Man being forced to say goodbye to his mentor as he passed on. Number 8. One More Day. After years of history and continuity, years of hurt and trauma and love and will they, won't they in terms of Peter and MJ getting together and even staying together, all of the love and turmoil between them was lost with one silly little deal that was made with Mephisto. Such a silly deal. In exchange for Aunt May's life, MJ and Peter decided to sacrifice their marriage to Mephisto, who wanted it because he basically is a weirdo who is maybe prophetically threatened by the potential offspring of Peter and MJ for some reason. Because it's been implied before that like if they basically have a child, that child can destroy Mephisto. I don't know. This story is titled One More Day, but for many MJ and Spider-Man shippers out there, it feels like it should be titled Worst Day Ever. Number 7. MJ and Peter break up. Again! As if it wasn't bad enough that MJ and Peter had their marriage erased years before, lately, in the last few years of the comics with Nick Spencer's run on Spider-Man, it seemed like we were building to have these two actually reunite. Yet shortly after they had ended up back together after years of being apart, following the complete erasure of their marriage, they were broken up again. And this happened as well after Peter was even considering popping the question to MJ. And to add insult to injury here, Peter also is greatly struggling in his personal life currently in the comics, while MJ is thriving and happy in a relationship with somebody else. I mean, hey, I'm happy for MJ, but honestly, poor Peter. It's just, why? Why can't these two be together? Just let it happen, Marvel. Just let it happen. Number 6, creating monsters. It's hard being Spider-Man, not just in terms of all the heroics or all the people he has to save, all the responsibility he has as a hero, and even not just in terms of his own personal trauma and struggles. But one of the hardest things about being Spider-Man is the balance between the two worlds of Peter's civilian life and his heroic life as Spider-Man. It's a dangerous lifestyle being a vigilante, and either Peter Parker is often forced to lie to people in order to protect them, or to tell them the truth, but putting them potentially at great risk. That is pretty much what happened with Carly Cooper, Peter's one-time girlfriend, who all in all was quite a capable person, being a forensic specialist with the NYPD. Carly ended up being kidnapped by the Green Goblin, and after refusing to reveal what she knew about Spider-Man's true identity, was turned into a goblin herself with the Goblin Serum. She took up the name Monster for a while, and even after she was returned to her normal human self, was forced to leave New York in the end to create some distance between her and Peter after her traumatic experience. Number 5, Chasm. Chasm was once the hero Spider-Man, aka Ben Reilly. During the Beyond event, he ended up losing all his memories, or a lot of his formative memories you could say, and as such was sent down a dark path to becoming the villain known as Chasm, struggling to determine right from wrong since he'd lost all those formative memories during the event. He's called Chasm because the memories left a hole in his mind. It's like a chasm, you see. Number 4, Reign. This alternate reality and its Spider-Man story involves an old senile Spider-Man who lost Mary Jane to cancer years earlier, which he discovers his own radioactivity actually caused. He has retired from being Spider-Man and now owns a flower shop, but hallucinations and incessant injustices cause him to attempt to return to a life of heroics once more. However, Spider-Man is now an old, deranged kind of man, and as such this story mostly involves him getting his butt kicked in between hallucinations of Mary Jane's ghost and rotting corpse. In the end, he does prevail, but not without us exploring the depth of his loss and his heartache. I think one of the darkest moments is when Spider-Man envisions Mary Jane's corpse emerging from her grave and entwining Spider-Man once more in her limbs, seemingly both kind of like embracing him, while also kind of like reprimanding him and accusing him of sort of causing her own death, which is kind of true. Although in the end, Mary Jane reveals even more tragically that she was always rooting for Peter, even with her dying breath, which also just makes this moment real sad. Number 3, Peter's ultimate death. While this death did not occur in the main continuity, it still represents one of the darkest moments in terms of Spider-Man's story, or at least one version of his story. We're talking about Peter's death in Into the Spider-Verse. This reality in the animated universe is still seemingly considered Earth 1610, which we know in the comics as the Ultimate Universe, though it does differ from the comic book version of Earth 1610. In this Earth 1610, Miles Morales also resides, though his Peter is somewhat different from his Ultimate comic book counterpart in terms of his story, and I would say his appearance. Peter Parker, who is blonde, dies during a fight with Kingpin here. His death is heartbreaking, not just for Miles, who now finds himself the only surviving Spider-Man in his reality, alone again after finding someone who he thought might actually be able to mentor him, but Peter's death here is also heartbreaking for his girlfriend Mary Jane, who only after his death reveals his secret identity to the world, and of course is super devastating for all of New York, and possibly I would say all of planet Earth, who knew him as their friendly neighborhood hero. Number 2, Revelations. As if MJ and Peter seemingly losing their chance at becoming a happy family wasn't enough, there was also the story and moment where we, the readers, learned the truth of what happened to Mary Jane and Peter Parker's seemingly unborn child, with it being revealed that their offspring was taken by none other than Norman Osborn for some insidious plot that, well, still has yet to be really revealed, even after like more than 20 years, I believe it's been. We were led to believe the baby was spirited away by a woman working for Osborn, Allison Mongrain, and was perhaps still alive even years later. However, Norman would then go on to claim the child had been permanently eliminated on his order. Allison Mongrain slipped something into Mary Jane's food at a restaurant, causing her to go into early labor, and then disguised herself as a nurse and intercepted the newborn. Mary Jane was told her child did not make it, and this whole plot was honestly super messed up, and I still don't even really fully understand what's going on with it. This is seriously messed up even for someone as dastardly as Norman, to be honest. Number 1. On repeat. One of the darkest moments in all of Spider-Man comics doesn't even come from Peter Parker's time as Spider-Man, but instead is tied to another hero to wear the mantle, his clone, Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly at one point is caught in a loop, being killed on repeat by the Jackal as part of his wild experiments, and then brought back only to perish again. This experience would greatly affect Ben and is believed to be the catalyst for what drove him to become a villain himself initially, with him eventually becoming the new Jackal. I mean, now he's Chasm, but before he was Jackal. He just keeps having these sad villain loops. It's really tragic, actually. Number 10. Stops Wonder Woman. In issue number 39 of the 2011 Wonder Woman series, Wonder Woman calls out her teammates for not killing. This might seem strange to you, knowing that Wonder Woman is a hero, and generally we don't associate heroes with killing, but at the end of the day, Diana is still an Amazon, and has also been the god of war. She is ultimately a warrior, so although she does believe in peaceful resolutions 100%, there are times when she acknowledges that to protect innocence, sometimes blood actually has to be shed. In this case, thousands of people were killed by an alien enemy who was harvesting humans to use as a food source, and Wonder Woman almost killed him for it, until she was stopped by Superman. While Batman later also calls her out, in the moment it is Clark that stands between Diana and this dark act. Superman puts himself between Diana and their foe, asking her, "What are you doing? Have you forgotten who we are? Who you are?" And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you want more content like this, we do have a superhero playlist that's filled with lots of other superhero content. Number 9. John Kent grows up. I think one of the darkest moments for fans of Superman and for Clark himself has to be when he was forced to miss out on his son's childhood. And of course, so were we. Robbed, I say. John Kent is the son of Superman and Lois Lane, and there was a period in the comics where he went out to space. He was basically like finding himself, learning about his powers, all that good stuff. However, while he was only gone for seemingly 3 weeks, time works differently in space, at least in this story. I feel like that's never really been a consistent thing in the comics, but here, that's a thing. For John, it was 7 years that had passed, with him moving from childhood towards adulthood by the time he returned to Earth, which means that Clark missed out on a lot of dad time, sadly. Number 8. Superman is defeated. Superman and Doomsday's fight in the comics would go on to become one of the most iconic in all of comic book history, thanks to it leading to the death of Doomsday and also, more importantly, the death of Superman. In this fight, Superman gives up his life to basically defeat Doomsday. This works with Doomsday perishing alongside Superman, ushering in the mourning period that would follow for Earth's greatest hero. But while some could not believe what they were reading, this shocking moment at least would not end up being quite so frighteningly permanent, with Clark Kent later being resurrected and returning. But at that time, the idea that a hero as great as Superman, who always seemingly ended up prevailing and winning against his villains, could lose and die was considered quite dark and shocking indeed, especially for such a positive hero like Superman. Number 7. Dark Multiverse Death of Superman. If you thought the death of Superman in his fight against Doomsday from the main continuity was rough, whoa, wait till you hear about the Dark Multiverse version of this story. After Superman dies at the hands of Doomsday, Lois becomes depressed and jaded, believing that the world basically failed Clark. She ends up bonding with the Eradicator, who claims it failed in its mission to resurrect the fallen Superman, and instead bonds with Lois so that she can succeed where she believes other heroes have failed, fighting on in Clark's name. However, Lois gets her whole superhero ideology a little bit twisted, and she goes too far in comparison to the hero who she's attempting to emulate here, her believed to be lost love Clark Kent, killing those who oppose her, villains and heroes alike. It turns out Superman was able to actually be resurrected, it just took longer than expected in this story. He returns but only lives long enough to express his disappointment and disgust at what Lois has become before he is taken out permanently by Cyborg Superman. Ouch. Number 6. Losing his dad. This one might make you cry, so be warned. In issue number 76 of Superman/Batman, Dick Grayson has taken up his father Bruce Wayne's role as Batman after his apparent death fighting against Darkseid. Now of course, we would later learn that Batman didn't actually die here, but at the same time everyone did think he was dead. Superman, aka Clark Kent, is dealing with his own grief at this time. He has also just lost his father, and his sense of loss comes into play when he goes to confront Dick Grayson, who has recently taken up his mentor and adopted adoptive father's mantle of Batman. Superman confronts Dick and tells him that he has to take the Batsuit off and give it up, that he has to let Batman go. However, Dick pushes back, turning the focus of the conversation to Clark's loss. Dick says, "I know you lost your father and you're angry. You can do anything in the world, but you can't bring them back. I lost my father too, and this is what I can do." Number 5. Fighting against his best friend. What could be worse than having to fight your best friend to the death? This is a very real thing that Clark was confronted with in the Dark Knight universe, the alternate reality belonging to Earth 31. This reality was created by Frank Miller and first appeared in Batman The Dark Knight Returns #1. After being retired for years, Batman is forced to return when the Joker also resurfaces. However, doing so puts him in conflict with Superman, who is currently working for the president. Tasked with getting rid of Batman, the two end up in a fight to the death, with Superman seemingly winning the fight as a result of Bruce having a heart attack and dying at a moment when he actually may have been about to win. Fortunately though, Batman would not really die, but instead use the fight to basically fake his death so that he could not have the president trying to make sure he was gone. And it's implied that despite the seemingly real high stakes fight we just witnessed between them, Clark may have actually been in on Bat's plan the whole time. Kind of ruined some of the stakes, I think, but at the same time, it's still a pretty crazy fight. Still a pretty dark time, I think we could say. Number 4. Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow? What is one of the saddest or darkest things that can happen in any superhero story? How about it ending? That is what this story featuring Superman is all about. It's told from a retrospective point of view through the voice of Lois Lane, who is being interviewed by the Daily Planet. The story reflects on the last few years of Superman's superhero career, with the interview taking place 10 years after Superman's final appearance, and revisiting the loss of many of his closest friends and allies, including deaths of Jimmy Olsen and Krypto. Number 3. Betrayed by his ally. One of the most heartbreaking alternate realities in the comics sees friend turn on friend in a deadly battle. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, Wonder Woman doesn't just fight Clark, she ends up killing him. This all goes down when Man's World decides to attack Themyscira. In a single moment, Diana's entire home is wiped out. Not only does she lose all her fellow warriors and sisters, but the tragedy also costs Diana her mom, Hippolyta, who also perishes in this attack. While she is frustrated that she was not able to protect her people, Superman arrives and he attempts to console her. Instead of comforting Diana though, this just basically makes her angry, as she also blames Superman and her fellow heroes of Earth for standing by and doing nothing to protect her people and her home. Clark, however, was called to his parents' side to basically protect them at the time, which is why he wasn't there. But this excuse is not enough for Diana, who basically does not hear it at all, and decides to take out her rage on him. An epic fight ensues that destroys most of the world and leaves Superman dead. However, Wonder Woman wouldn't remember what she had done until years later. And that's also part of the heartbreaking part of this series, because when she remembers it, it's like, whoa, devastating. Number 2. Supergirl's demise. What's worse than fighting your best friend or being killed by an ally? How about losing family? And not just any family, a fellow Kryptonian at that. With Superman being one of the last surviving members of Krypton, the loss of cousin Supergirl during the Crisis on Infinite Earths event cut deep. Kara gave her life to protect Kal, who was losing badly in a fight against the Anti-Monitor at the time. She succeeded in saving him, but it ended up costing Kara her own life, leaving Superman to mourn her. Number 1. The death of Lois Lane. If you thought the death of Superman was bad, just wait till you see what happens when Lois dies. It is not pretty. It's not good. You could argue this is one of the darkest Superman moments I think we've ever gotten across the multiverse. In the Injustice reality and story, Lois Lane is killed by the Joker and Harley Quinn, snuffed out in an instant when Superman is tricked into believing that Lois is actually Doomsday Return, with the life that was growing inside her also being lost, what would have been her and Clark's firstborn. This, as well as the devastation of Metropolis, causes Superman to basically snap. He in turn kills Joker and sets down a path to become one of the greatest villains and tyrants Earth has probably ever seen.